I checked the smart fridge logs and uncovered my wife's late-night secret. That's how it started. Not with a bang, not with some dramatic confrontation, but with the cold, sterile glow of a digital display in our kitchen. It was 2 a.m. The house was dead silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator, and I couldn't sleep. Again. The usual suspects: work stress, the lingering anxiety about that house payment we'd pushed back, but mostly it was this feeling, this itch, a low-grade hum of unease that had been buzzing under the surface of our lives for months. Sarah was restless too. I could feel it even when she was asleep beside me, a subtle tension in her breathing. Before we get too deep into this, seriously, if you're finding yourself drawn into this story, hit that subscribe button. And while you're at it, give this a like. It really helps us out. Sharing it with friends who might appreciate a raw, honest look at things is huge. And don't forget to drop a comment down below. Let me know what you think, what you would have done, or just if you've ever felt this way. Your engagement keeps stories like mine alive, and honestly, putting this out there feels like the only way I can start to process it. Our kitchen, usually the heart of our home, felt alien and cold at that hour. The stainless steel of the smart fridge gleamed under the dim moonlight filtering through the blinds. It was supposed to be a convenience, a modern marvel that kept track of our groceries, suggested recipes, and even ordered things when we were running low. Ironically, it was this very convenience, this hyper-connectivity, that became the architect of my undoing. I'd been fiddling with the touchscreen, a habit I'd developed lately, scrolling through past inventory logs, trying to pinpoint when we'd run out of that fancy almond milk Sarah loved. It was then that I noticed it, a section I'd never really paid attention to before: usage history. Not just what was taken out, but when. Sarah was a creature of habit, meticulous in her routines. Dinner at 6, usually, dishes done by 7, a book or some Netflix from 8 to 10, then bed, usually, lights out by 11. But this log, it showed activity at 1:17 a.m., then again at 1:48 a.m. and 2:03 a.m. Small things, probably. A glass of water, some leftover cookies, but it was the frequency that set off alarm bells. And it wasn't just one night, it was a pattern. The last week alone, the fridge had been accessed 3 times past midnight. And it wasn't just opening the door. There were entries for item removed, milk, cheese slices, that expensive dark chocolate we'd been saving. My heart started to pound, a heavy, dull thud against my ribs. This was so unlike Sarah. She was a planner, a list maker. She hated waste. If she was hungry late at night, she'd usually just grab an apple or a yogurt from the front of the fridge, something she knew was there. This felt furtive, secretive. I scrolled back further, my finger trembling slightly. The same pattern, stretching back weeks. Sometimes it was just a single item. Other times it looked like she'd made a small late-night snack. I've always been a trusting guy, or at least I thought I was. Sarah and I, we'd been together for 10 years, married for 6. We'd built this life together, brick by brick. This house in the suburbs, the 2 cars in the driveway, the comfortable routine that felt so solid, so dependable. She was my rock, my confidant, the one person I could always count on. She was funny, smart, beautiful, and she had this way of making even the most mundane things feel extraordinary. Our relationship wasn't some Hollywood romance, it was real. It was built on late-night talks, shared dreams, the quiet comfort of knowing someone was in your corner, no matter what. We had our arguments, sure, nothing major, the usual stuff about who left the toilet seat up or whose turn it was to deal with the overflowing recycling bin. But underneath it all, there was this bedrock of love and respect. Or so I believed. The initial thought was simple. Sarah was just stressed. Maybe she was having trouble sleeping and trying to comfort herself with snacks. But the intensity of the entries, the way the logs seemed to be deliberately obscured by single item removals rather than larger hauls, nagged at me. It felt like someone trying to be discreet. And the fact that she'd never mentioned it, that was the kicker. If she was having trouble sleeping or if she was craving something, she would have told me. We told each other everything. I closed the fridge door, the soft click echoing in the oppressive silence. The kitchen lights, even on their dim setting, seemed too bright now, too revealing. I walked over to the window and pulled the blinds back a sliver. The streetlights cast long, eerie shadows across our manicured lawn. Everything looked normal, peaceful, the kind of suburban tranquility that was supposed to be a reward for hard work. But tonight, it just felt like a facade. I went back to the fridge and pulled up the logs again. I started comparing the times of the fridge activity with my own movements. I'd been traveling a lot for work in the last couple of months. Conferences, client meetings. Sometimes I was gone for 2 or 3 days at a time. I'd always felt a pang of guilt leaving Sarah alone, but she'd always been so understanding, so supportive. "Go get him, honey," she'd say, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "We'll be fine here." And then it hit me. The late-night snacking wasn't happening when I was home. It was happening when I was away. The dates of the midnight fridge raids aligned perfectly with my recent business trips. My gut twisted. This wasn't about stress. This was about something else entirely. Something she was doing when she thought I wasn't there to see. My mind, already a tangled mess of anxiety, started to race. Who else was accessing the fridge?
Was she having someone over? The thought was so jarring, so alien to everything I understood about our life that I physically recoiled. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass of the fridge door, trying to regulate my breathing. This couldn't be real. Sarah? My Sarah? The woman who cried when a spider was in the bathroom? The woman who meticulously organized our vacation photos? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was sleepwalking? No, that was absurd. Sleepwalking doesn't involve removing specific items and logging them. Maybe she had a secret late-night snacking habit she was embarrassed about. But why the secrecy? Why the careful, almost calculated, logging of individual items? It felt deliberate, like she was trying to cover her tracks. I walked into our bedroom, the carpet feeling unnervingly plush beneath my bare feet. Sarah was asleep, her face turned towards the wall, her dark hair fanned out on the pillow. She looked so peaceful, so innocent. How could this quiet, sleeping woman be the same person whose late-night fridge habits were screaming secrets at me? I stood there for a long time, just watching her breathe. The soft rise and fall of her chest, the slight tremor of her lips. Was it all an act? Was this calm exterior masking something dark and complex? The guilt of even thinking these thoughts washed over me, a hot wave of shame. I loved her. I trusted her. But the logs didn't lie. I crept back into the living room, my mind churning. I needed more. I needed something concrete, something undeniable. The smart fridge logs were a symptom, but what was the disease? I found myself staring at my phone, the screen a bright portal in the darkness. I scrolled through our shared photo albums, our text message history. Nothing out of the ordinary. Just the usual sweet messages, silly jokes, plans for the weekend. It was all so normal. Too normal. Then I remembered. A few weeks ago, Sarah had been talking about a new gym she'd joined. She was always trying to stay fit, and this place had a killer spin class schedule. She'd mentioned a new friend she'd made there, a woman named Jessica. Sarah had been a little vague about Jessica, just that they'd bonded over their mutual dislike of early morning workouts. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. Sarah made friends easily. But now, a knot of suspicion tightened in my stomach. I picked up my laptop and opened a new browser tab. Jessica. Sarah's gym friend. I typed her name into the search bar, adding Sarah's friend for good measure. The results were sparse. A few social media profiles, mostly private. One seemed more public, a woman with a friendly smile and bright eyes. She looked normal. Attractive, but not in a way that immediately screamed homewrecker. My hands were shaking as I clicked on the profile. Pictures of her at the gym, with other friends, at outdoor events. It all looked innocent enough. But then I scrolled out. And there, amongst the photos of Jessica at a beach party, was a picture that made my breath catch in my throat. It was Sarah, smiling, arm in arm with Jessica. But it wasn't just that. In the background, slightly out of focus, was a man. A man I vaguely recognized from Sarah's holiday party last year. A man who was married. And he was laughing, his hand resting a little too casually on Jessica's hip. My mind reeled. Sarah and Jessica were friends. Jessica knew this married man. Was it possible? The fridge logs, the late-night snacks, the secrecy. It was all starting to coalesce into a terrifying picture. I kept scrolling through Jessica's profile, my eyes scanning every detail, my heart a frantic drum solo. And then I saw it. A photo posted about 2 months ago. It was a selfie taken indoors. The lighting was dim and the angle was a little awkward, but it was undeniably Sarah.
She was wearing a t-shirt that looked suspiciously like one of mine, and beside her, his arms slung around her shoulders, was the same married man from the beach photo. They were smiling, a little too close, and in the background, slightly blurred but distinct, I could make out a familiar piece of furniture, the distinctive carved leg of the coffee table in our living room. The blood drained from my face. This wasn't just a late-night snack. This was evidence, hard, undeniable evidence that Sarah was having people over, people who shouldn't have been there when I was gone. The fridge logs weren't just about comfort eating, they were about fueling clandestine meetings. My own fridge in my own home being used as a pantry for my wife's secret life. The betrayal, the sheer audacity of it, was a physical blow. I stumbled back from the laptop, my vision blurring. The comfortable silence of the house was now deafening, a hollow echo of all the trust I had so blindly placed. I looked towards the bedroom where Sarah slept, her innocence a cruel mockery. The low hum of the smart fridge in the kitchen, once a symbol of modern convenience, now sounded like a sinister whisper, a constant reminder of the secrets it held and the life I thought I had. I was trapped in a nightmare, and the dawn, which was still hours away, felt like an impossible distance. The next morning, the alarm blared at 6:30 a.m., a brutal intrusion into the fractured piece of my mind. Sarah stirred beside me, groaning softly, and reached over to smack the snooze button with practiced ease. Her face was still soft with sleep, her lips slightly parted. For a sickening moment, I saw her as I always had, my loving, innocent wife. Then the images from last night flooded back, the fridge logs, Jessica's profile, the selfie in our living room with the married man. My stomach churned. I rolled over, feigning sleep, my body rigid with a tension that went deeper than any muscle strain. She nuzzled closer, her hair tickling my arm. "Morning," she mumbled, her voice thick. I didn't respond.
The disconnect between her easy affection and the cold dread coiling inside me was a chasm I didn't know how to cross. She pulled away, a small frown creasing her brow. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone laced with a hint of concern. I forced a rough exhale, trying to mimic sleep. Just tired." She didn't push. She never pushed. That was part of the problem, wasn't it? Her easy acceptance, her unwavering support. It had always felt like a testament to our bond. But now it felt like a carefully constructed cage, built to keep me from seeing what was happening right under my nose. The day crawled by in a haze of forced normalcy. I went through the motions at work, answering emails, sitting in on meetings, my mind miles away. Every casual mention of family, every colleague talking about their spouse, felt like a fresh stab. I kept replaying the photos, dissecting every detail. The way Sarah's eyes were bright, almost feverish in the selfie. The man's confident posture, his hand possessively on her shoulder. Who was he, really? I recognized him vaguely from work events, someone from IT, I thought. He had a wife, a kid. I'd seen pictures. This was more than just a fling. This was a calculated, dangerous affair. And it was happening in my home, my sanctuary. Sarah texted me at lunchtime. "Thinking of you? Busy day?" Typical Sarah. Always thoughtful, always checking in. I typed a curt reply. "Yeah, long one." I felt a surge of anger, not just at her, but at myself. How could I have been so oblivious, so trusting? I'd prided myself on being observant, on being a good husband, but I was blind, completely, utterly blind. That evening, I came home with a plan, or rather a desperate, half-formed strategy. I needed to see Sarah's reaction. I needed to probe, to look for the cracks in her facade. As I walked through the front door, the familiar scent of Sarah's cooking, some lemon herb chicken tonight, filled the air. She was in the kitchen, humming softly as she chopped vegetables. She looked up, a bright, welcoming smile on her face. "Hey you, rough day?" "You could say that," I replied, forcing a smile that felt brittle. I leaned against the counter, watching her move. She was so ordinary, so domestic. It was a stark contrast to the woman I'd seen in those photos. "Anything interesting happen?" she asked, not looking up from her task. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Not really, just the usual grind." I paused, trying to gauge her. "You know, I was thinking about the smart fridge yesterday." Her chopping slowed for a fraction of a second, so imperceptible I almost missed it.
Oh yeah? What about it? Just how crazy the technology is, I continued, my voice deliberately casual. It tracks everything. I was looking at the usage logs, just for fun. It's weird seeing what we've eaten and when. She laughed, a light, airy sound that was supposed to be reassuring. Yeah, it's a little obsessive, isn't it?
I keep meaning to clear some of that out. Her eyes flickered towards me for a brief moment, then back to the vegetables. Too brief, too evasive. It is, I agreed, my gaze fixed on her hands. I noticed a few late-night entries from when I was on my last business trip. You must have been up late. Craving something? She shrugged, a little too nonchalantly. Maybe. Couldn't sleep. You know how it is when you're alone. Her voice was perfectly modulated, innocent. But something in the slight stiffness of her shoulders, the way she avoided my eyes, screamed otherwise. Yeah, I guess, I said, my voice tight. I walked over to the fridge, my hand hovering over the touchscreen. It's funny though, sometimes it's just one thing, like a single slice of cheese or a few squares of chocolate. You'd think if you were just hungry, you'd grab a whole handful or something more substantial. Her movements faltered. The knife clattered against the cutting board. She quickly picked it up, her face averted. I don't know, honey. I guess I was just trying to be good. Not too much sugar late at night. Her voice was a little higher now, a subtle tremor beneath the surface. The air in the kitchen grew heavy. This was it, the moment of truth. I turned from the fridge, my eyes locking onto hers. Sarah, I said, my voice low and steady. Who were you having those late-night snacks with? Her face went pale. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, a flicker of something that looked like panic, quickly masked by a practiced defensiveness. What are you talking about, Mark? I was alone. I told you I couldn't sleep. No, I said, stepping closer. You weren't alone. Not when you were using the fridge. I saw the photos, Sarah. Jessica's profile. The man. In our living room. With you. The blood drained from her face, leaving her skin a ghastly white. The knife slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the tile floor. Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a terror that was undeniably real. She looked like a cornered animal. You looked at my phone? She whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't have to look at your phone, I said, the words coming out like shards of glass. I found him online, and I found him with you, in our house, wearing my shirt. The accusation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they didn't look like tears of remorse. They looked like tears of fury, of desperation. You're twisting things, Mark. She choked out, her voice trebling. Jessica and I, we're friends. He's just a friend of hers. It's not what you think. Then what is it, Sarah? I demanded, my voice rising, the carefully constructed comb shattering. What is it that requires secret midnight snacks and clandestine meetings in our living room with a married man? Explain that to me. She took a shaky step back. Her gaze darted around the kitchen, as if searching for an escape route. Her carefully constructed composure was crumbling, revealing the raw fear beneath. It's complicated, she stammered. Complicated? I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Betrayal is complicated now? Infidelity is complicated? It wasn't like that, she cried, the tears finally spilling over, tracing paths down her pale cheeks. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. A mistake that involved late-night trips to the fridge and sneaking around behind my back. I pressed, my own anger a hot, searing tide threatening to overwhelm me. A mistake that involved him wearing my clothes in our home? She flinched as if I'd struck her. He borrowed one of your shirts. It was cold that night. He was staying over. Staying over? The words were a guttural roar. My mind reeled. He was staying over at our house when I was gone? The sanctity of our marriage, of our home, felt violated beyond repair. You let him stay over? She nodded, her shoulders hunched, her face buried in her hands. The raw agony radiating from her was almost palpable, but it was drowned out by my own overwhelming sense of betrayal. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted implicitly, had systematically dismantled our life, piece by piece, while I was none the wiser.
The smart fridge, designed for convenience, had become the silent witness to her lies. And now the evidence was out in the open, stark and undeniable. The quiet hum of the refrigerator in the background seemed to mock me, a constant reminder of the secrets it had meticulously logged. My entire world had just imploded, and I was left standing in the wreckage, staring at the ruins of my marriage. The kitchen, once a symbol of our shared life, now felt like a crime scene. Her confession, however fragmented and tearful, confirmed my worst fears. He had stayed over. He had worn my shirt. He had been in my house with my wife while I was away. The depth of the deception was staggering, a gaping wound that throbbed with a relentless, agonizing pain. I felt a primal urge to lash out, to shatter something, anything, to match the chaos raging inside me. But I was frozen, trapped in a horrifying tableau. The silence stretched, broken only by Sarah's ragged sobs and the relentless, accusing hum of the smart fridge. My mind raced, grasping for anything to make sense of this nightmare. Was this all? Was he just a friend? Or was this a pattern, a deeply ingrained habit of deceit? The questions clawed at me, each one more terrifying than the last. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the woman I loved, but a stranger who had systematically lied, cheated, and betrayed me. The image of him, his arm around her, his hand on her hip, burned into my retinas, and the chilling thought that he had been in our bed, in our home, while I was working to provide for them both, sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. I needed to know more. I needed to understand the scope of this betrayal.
Was Jessica involved? Was she an accomplice? Or just a pawn in this elaborate game? The complexity of it all threatened to drown me. And the sheer audacity of Sarah, her ability to maintain the illusion of a happy marriage while living a double life, was both terrifying and strangely fascinating. It spoke of a depth of deceit I hadn't thought possible. I was adrift in a sea of confusion and rage, with no land in sight. The confession, if you could even call it that, hung in the air like poison. Sarah stood there, a pathetic figure of sobs and stammered excuses, her face a mask of guilt and fear. I couldn't process it all at once. He had stayed over. He had worn my shirt. He had been in our home while I was away. It was a betrayal so profound, so complete. It felt like the ground had vanished beneath my feet. The smart fridge, that symbol of our modern, connected life, had become the silent, digital arbiter of my destruction. It had logged every clandestine snack, every late-night rendezvous, every piece of evidence that Sarah was living a life I knew nothing about. I felt a hollow ache spread through my chest, a cold, dead space where my trust used to be. So I managed to croak out, my voice raspy. He stayed the night? In our bed? The question was an accusation, a demand for confirmation of the unspeakable. Sarah flinched, burying her face deeper into her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. It wasn't like that, Mark. Not how you're imagining it. How am I imagining it, Sarah? I stepped closer, my voice dangerously low. Am I imagining the married man from IT, the one whose wife I've met at company picnics, spending the night in my house, wearing my clothes, while I'm out of town trying to make ends meet for us? She finally looked up, her eyes red and swollen, but there was a defiant glint in them now, a desperate spark of self-preservation. He was drunk. He didn't have a ride. Jessica was worried about him. I let him crash on the couch. He got cold. He grabbed one of your shirts from the laundry basket. It was an impulse, a mistake. An impulse? I echoed, the absurdity of it all hitting me like a physical blow. Letting a drunk married man crash on our couch wearing my clothes while I'm hundreds of miles away. That's your explanation for the secret late-night fridge raids, for the furtive glances, for everything? My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, hurt, anger, disbelief, and a sickening, profound sense of loss. The fridge, that was just me, she whispered, her voice thin and reedy. I was stressed. I couldn't sleep. I needed something. It was stupid. I didn't want you to worry.
didn't want me to worry," I repeated, the words laced with venom. "So instead, you decided to lie, to sneak around, to bring another man into our home. You call that not wanting me to worry? That's called deceiving me, Sarah. That's called destroying everything we've built."
I paced the length of the kitchen, my hands clenched into fists. Every word she said felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. The casualness with which she'd spoken about the fridge logs, her initial attempts to deflect my questions, all of it pointed to a deep-seated pattern of dishonesty. It wasn't just a lapse in judgment, it was a calculated effort to keep me in the dark. "Who is he, Sarah?" I demanded, stopping abruptly and facing her. "Who is this guy you're letting stay over? What's his name?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. It's David. David Miller. David Miller. The name clicked. The IT guy. I remembered him now. A quiet, unassuming man, always polite but a little intense when you talked to him. I'd seen him a few times at company events, always with his wife, a nice-looking woman named Emily. The thought of him, her husband, being involved with Sarah, it was a knot of conflicting loyalties and betrayals that made my head spin. "David Miller," I repeated, tasting the name, letting it settle. "And Emily Miller? Does she know he was crashing on our couch?" Sarah's face crumpled again. "No, of course not. Mark, please, you have to understand. It wasn't like that. David and I were friends. We connect. He understands things. Things you haven't been around to understand lately." "Things I haven't been around to understand?" My voice rose again, laced with a bitter edge. "Because I've been working? Because I've been trying to provide for us? Because I've been out there busting my ass while you've been, what, finding emotional support from the IT department?" "It's not just about work," she cried, standing up, her own anger finally surfacing. "It's about us. You've been so distant, Mark. Always on your phone, always stressed about money. We don't talk anymore, not really. And David, he listens. He's there. He makes me feel seen." The accusation stung, but it was also true to an extent. I had been stressed. I had been absent. The pressure of keeping our lives afloat had weighed heavily on me, and I'd retreated into myself, burying my anxieties in work. But that didn't excuse what she had done. It didn't justify her betrayal. "So this is my fault?" I asked, a cruel smile playing on my lips. "You're saying you cheated on me because I was working too hard?" "I didn't cheat on you," she insisted, her voice cracking. "It was a moment of weakness, a stupid mistake, and it's over. It will never happen again." "It's over?" I stared at her, incredulous. "How can you say it's over? You let him stay in our house. He wore my clothes. What if I'd come home early? What then, Sarah? Would you have hidden him in the pantry?" Her silence was a damning confession. She couldn't answer. The sheer audacity of her actions, the casual way she seemed to compartmentalize her life, was chilling. It wasn't just about a fling. It was about a fundamental disrespect for me, for our marriage, for our home. "I saw the photos on Jessica's profile, Sarah," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "I saw you, and I saw David, arm in arm, smiling. And in the background, our coffee table, our living room. You weren't just having a moment of weakness. You were building a secret life, a life that involved him in our home when I wasn't here." Her eyes widened in panic. You saw those?" "Yes, I saw those," I confirmed, my gaze unwavering. "And I saw the dates, 2 months ago. So this wasn't just a one-time thing. This has been going on for a while, hasn't it? While I was traveling, while I was working late, while I was trying to be the man you married." She stood frozen, her face a picture of pure dread. She knew she was caught. The carefully constructed facade had crumbled, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. But beneath the vulnerability, I saw something else too, a cold, hard pragmatism. She was trying to minimize the damage, to salvage what she could.
"Mark, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice laced with a new, desperate plea. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I swear. It was a mistake, a huge mistake. But it's done. It's over. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll go to therapy. I'll do anything to fix this." "Fix this?" I scoffed. "How do you fix this, Sarah? How do you unsee the photos? How do you unlearn the fact that my wife was having secret rendezvous in my own home with another man? How do you unfeel the fact that our smart fridge was being used as a catering service for your affair?" The smart fridge. The thought sent a fresh wave of revulsion through me. It was more than just a piece of technology. It was a symbol of our shared life, now tainted by her deception. It had betrayed me by its very existence, by its ability to record and reveal the truth I never wanted to know. "I need to think," I said, the words coming out with a finality that surprised even me. I can't do this right now." I turned away from her, unable to bear the sight of her anymore. The woman I loved, the woman I had built my life with, was now a stranger, a walking embodiment of betrayal. The scent of the lemon herb chicken, once a comforting aroma, now felt cloying and nauseating. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there amidst the shattered remnants of our evening. I went into the living room, the space where I'd seen the damning selfie, and sank onto the couch. My mind was a chaotic storm of images and emotions. The fridge logs, the photos, Sarah's tearful confession, the name David Miller. It was too much. I felt a deep, bone-weary exhaustion, but sleep was a distant luxury. I was trapped in a nightmare, and the dawn, which was still hours away, offered no solace, only the promise of a reality I could no longer recognize.
The silence of the house, once a source of peace, now pressed in on me, a suffocating blanket of unspoken truths and unanswerable questions. What was I going to do? How could I ever trust her again? The betrayal cut so deep, it felt like a physical wound. And the worst part was, I knew this was just the beginning, the tip of the iceberg. There were so many more questions, so many more layers to this deception that I was afraid to uncover. The smart fridge stood silent in the kitchen, its digital display a stark, cold testament to the secrets it held. It had witnessed everything, recorded everything, and now it had delivered the truth. And the truth, I was discovering, was far more devastating than I could have ever imagined. The weight of it all was crushing. I closed my eyes, but the images wouldn't fade. David Miller, Sarah, our home, the smart fridge logs. It was an endless loop, playing out in the dark theater of my mind. I needed air. I needed to escape this house, this suffocating atmosphere of lies. I stood up, my legs feeling like lead, and walked towards the front door, needing to get out, needing to breathe, needing some space from the ruins of my life. The chill of the night air hit me like a slap as I stepped out onto the porch. It was late, the streetlights casting long, distorted shadows across the lawn. The world outside felt alien, disconnected from the implosion that had just occurred within the walls of my home. I walked, aimlessly at first, my feet carrying me down the familiar suburban streets, past houses with their windows dark, their inhabitants likely asleep, unaware of the seismic shift that had just redefined my existence. Every rustle of leaves, every distant car engine seemed amplified, mocking the deafening roar of the chaos inside me. I found myself walking towards the old park, the one where Sarah and I used to go on dates early in our relationship. The swings creaked in the gentle breeze, empty sentinels of forgotten innocence. I sat on a cold metal bench, the dampness seeping through my jeans, and stared up at the vast, indifferent sky. Stars, so many stars. They had always seemed like symbols of permanence, of things that endured. Now they just felt distant, uncaring witnesses to my unraveling. My thoughts kept circling back, a relentless, morbid carousel. David Miller,
The name still felt foreign, absurd. The IT guy, the one with the wife, the one who stayed over, who wore my shirt. The sheer gall of it, the presumption. It wasn't just about sex, was it? It was about disrespect. About him seeing our home, our lives, as some kind of playground. And Sarah, my Sarah, had facilitated it. She had opened our door, our lives, to this intrusion. I remembered the way she'd looked at me when I confronted her. The fear, yes, but also that flicker of defiance, that desperate attempt to reframe the narrative. It wasn't like that, she'd insisted. He was drunk. He was cold.
As if those were mitigating circumstances for inviting a married man, a colleague's husband, into our bed while I was away. As if grabbing my shirt from the laundry basket was some kind of innocent impulse. The rationalizations were so flimsy, so transparent, they were almost insulting. And the smart fridge. God, the smart fridge. It was supposed to make our lives easier, more connected. Now it felt like a witness for the prosecution, a silent, digital accuser. Every logged snack, every late-night entry was a piece of evidence, meticulously recorded, undeniable. It had documented her loneliness, her stress, her whatever it was that drove her to this. But it had also documented her deception. It had been there, in the kitchen, humming its steady electronic tune as she made her choices. It had seen her reach for the milk, the cheese, the chocolate, while I was thousands of miles away, working, providing. It had known, and I had not. A wave of nausea washed over me. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the feeling of being played, of being the oblivious fool, the one who believed in the illusion while the reality was unfolding right under my nose, logged in the digital memory of our kitchen appliance. The trust I had placed in her, in us, felt like a naive delusion. How could I have been so blind, so utterly, completely deceived? I thought about the selfie, Jessica's profile, the two of them, Sarah and David, arm in arm, their smiles too bright, too knowing. And in the background, our coffee table, our living room. It wasn't a fleeting mistake. It was a deliberate act, a choice to create a secret life, a parallel existence that I was not a part of, that I was actively excluded from. I stood up, the coldness of the bench a stark contrast to the burning rage that simmered within me. I needed to do something. I couldn't just sit here and let this consume me. But what? What do you do when the foundation of your life has been pulverized? My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Sarah. Just 2 words. Where are you? I stared at the screen, the simple question a testament to the chasm that had opened between us. She was on the other side of it, in the wreckage, wondering where I was. And I was out here, in the quiet darkness, trying to figure out if there was anything left to salvage. I didn't reply. I couldn't. The words felt inadequate, clumsy, incapable of bridging the gulf of deceit. I pocketed the phone and started walking again, my pace quickening. I needed distance. I needed to breathe air that hadn't been tainted by her lies, by the scent of her cooking, by the silent judgment of our smart appliances. I ended up at the edge of town, near the highway entrance. The endless stream of headlights, each one representing a destination, a journey, a life, blurred into a hypnotic rhythm. I watched them, a phantom observer of a world that continued to move forward, oblivious to my personal apocalypse.
The anger was still there, a raw, vibrating energy. But beneath it, something else was starting to surface. A deep, aching sorrow. The loss of what I thought we had. The dreams we'd shared. The future I had envisioned, now reduced to ashes. It wasn't just about David Miller. It was about the erosion of my reality. It was about the shattering of the image of the woman I loved, replaced by a stranger who was capable of such profound betrayal. I thought about Emily Miller, David's wife. What would she think? What would she feel if she knew? The thought of her, innocent, unsuspecting, being blindsided by this, added another layer of bitterness to my own pain. We were both victims, weren't we? Victims of the choices of two people who had, for whatever twisted reason, decided to play with fire. A car horn blared nearby, startling me. I was standing too close to the road. I stepped back, my heart hammering. I needed to go home. I couldn't stay out here forever, a lost soul wandering the suburbs. But the thought of walking back into that house, into the suffocating silence, the lingering scent of her deception, filled me with dread. I sat down on the curb, my head in my hands. The adrenaline that had fueled my walk began to dissipate, leaving behind a profound exhaustion. The emotional roller coaster of the past few hours had left me drained, hollowed out. This wasn't a movie. There were no dramatic revelations, no grand pronouncements of forgiveness. There was just the raw, brutal truth. Sarah had cheated. She had lied. She had betrayed me. And I had the digital logs to prove it. The thought of the smart fridge, the silent witness, sent a shiver down my spine. It was more than just a kitchen appliance. It was a symbol of our modern lives, interconnected, transparent, and yet somehow capable of hiding the deepest of secrets. It had provided the evidence, yes, but it hadn't caused the pain. The pain came from Sarah, from her choices, from her inability or unwillingness to be honest with me. I imagined confronting her again, demanding answers she clearly couldn't provide, or wouldn't. What was the point? The damage was done. The trust, once shattered, could it ever be rebuilt? The idea felt like trying to reassemble a broken mirror. You might get the pieces back together, but the cracks would always be there, a constant reminder of what had been lost. A new thought emerged, cold and sharp. This wasn't just about Sarah and David. It was about me, my role in all of this. Had I contributed to this distance? Had my focus on work, my perceived emotional withdrawal, created a void that David Miller, the attentive IT guy, had so readily filled? The question was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was part of the truth, wasn't it? We were a unit, a partnership, and partnerships, when they falter, rarely fall due to the actions of just one person. But that didn't excuse her.
It didn't erase the late-night snacks, the secret meetings, the shared intimacy that was never meant to be shared with anyone else. It didn't negate the fundamental violation of our vows. I stood up again, the weariness a heavy weight in my limbs. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, a pale, grudging dawn. The world was waking up, unaware of the private cataclysm I had just endured. I started walking back towards home. There was no other option. I had to face her. I had to face the wreckage. I couldn't run from it. The smart fridge would be there, humming its electronic secrets. The kitchen would still smell faintly of lemon herb chicken, a scent now irrevocably tainted. As I approached my street, I saw our house, bathed in the soft pre-dawn light. It looked the same, deceptively normal, but inside, everything had changed. My home, my sanctuary, had been violated. My marriage, the bedrock of my life, had crumbled. I walked up the driveway, the crunch of gravel under my shoes sounding unnaturally loud. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside, the familiar air of our home now heavy with an unspoken tension. Sarah was in the living room, sitting on the couch, her silhouette a small, hunched figure in the dim light. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red-rimmed, her face pale and drawn. "You're back," she whispered, her voice raspy. I nodded, my gaze sweeping over her. There was no anger left in me, only a profound, desolate emptiness. The rage had burned itself out, leaving behind only the ashes of what had been. "We need to talk," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. She nodded, tears welling up again, but this time they felt different. Less fear, more resignation. "I know," she whispered. The sun was rising now, casting long, golden shafts of light through the living room window. It illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air, the quiet stillness of a room that had once held so much warmth and laughter. Now, it just felt empty, cold. I looked at her, this woman who had been my wife, my confidant, my everything. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I didn't know her at all. The smart fridge had revealed her secrets, but it couldn't give me back the man I used to be. That man, the one who believed in us, the one who trusted blindly, was gone. He had been left behind somewhere on a cold park bench, under a sky full of uncaring stars. All that was left was me, standing in the ruins of my life, with nothing but the cold, hard facts and the lingering hum of a refrigerator that knew too much. The air was still, the dawn was breaking, and I was utterly, irrevocably alone.